Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cut and Splice. This is Jason,
And I'm Matt.
And this is Gil.
and tonight we are talking about the uh, 2016 film Free Fire. It's a movie directed by a guy named Ben Wheatley, and I think it's a pretty interesting film. And I was the one who suggested this movie, and I'm extremely curious to hear what the other guys thought about it.
One thing that happened to me is, as I was watching it, is I had one of those moments of, wait, is that the movie that was such and such and such? And then I was like, yeah, this is what this is. I don't know.
Meaning that you were slightly aware of its existence.
Yeah, because when it came out, there was this talk about a movie where everything happens like in a warehouse,
Yeah,
it was like the shtick of the movie, and it got so reviews, so I didn't end up like seeing it. Most of the time, I don't see these movies; I just can't get around to it. But I thought, that's interesting. I wonder how well or not so well they did it because those are very tough to pull off. Um,
yeah, I can think of a few that definitely didn't work out so well.
Yeah, so it's like having this moment like 20 minutes into the movie. They're just gonna stay here the entire movie. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of like strap in. I don't know, Matt, were you aware of it when you were?
I had seen trailers. I don't remember precisely why I didn't go see it in theaters. I I don't know. It just kind of flew under the radar for me. I don't know why I just broke on that word right there, but I don't know. It just didn't get me off my ass at the time. Maybe it was because of the Trump election. I don't know.
Maybe.
Blame it on Trump. I don't know. Maybe there was just too much shit going on in my life at the time, but it was. Yeah, I did finally just watch it last this last week. So yeah, this is going to be a first impressions thing for me.
Hmm.
I saw that I guess the director, he directed Meg 2, which is in theaters
I actually just saw that tonight. I didn't see the
recently.
movie tonight. When I glanced at his IMDb page, I was like, oh wow, that's a reason that I might actually seek that out and see that.
Yeah, and also he did another movie that you mentioned, Jason, to possibly do in the future, Kill List or something.
Um, I don't know if I recommended that or not, but that did jump out at me. Um, I've heard of that movie before, but I've never seen it.
Oh, you've never seen it, so never mind. I probably.
You might be
Oh,
conflating it with something else,
yeah,
but
no, no,
I
there's Killer Elite. Maybe I'm
oh
confusing it.
yeah, perhaps it might be that one. But
Yeah.
no, I was listening to some of the stuff this guy was saying, the director, and I think that's a movie that he did that gained some acclaim or something like that in particular. It made me kind of want to possibly seek it out.
Yeah. Um, cool.
I have never seen any of his other films, so I don't know how this compares to any of them.
And what is it about this movie specifically that you thought would worth
Oh,
discussing? Like,
well, a few things. For one thing, we were talking about maybe I don't know 6 months ago or something like that. Well, I would say all the time whenever we're talking about this podcast and trying to figure out what to watch, batting ideas around. We're always talking about trying to do some stuff that's different. And I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what's specifically made this come to mind, but I know that uh, years ago when this movie came out, um, I remember. I don't remember if I saw it with my friend Steven or if I just saw it at the exact same, like the opening week when it came out, and he also saw it or something like that. But I just know that we discussed the film in depth when it came out, and we both liked it a lot, particularly because of the fact that it's funny that Matt mentioned politics because it was 2016. I wonder if that might have had something to do with it. I don't know. But I just know that both of us saw this movie, possibly together, possibly not. I don't remember. And felt that it was a huge breath of fresh air because it's a movie that I just remember 2016, there was a lot of there's a lot of people talking about 2016 as being like one of the worst years of all time, and I didn't have a particularly terrible year in 2016, but I remember like there was a lot going on, and in particularly in regards to movies, both of us just had this feeling that we were just it was just a lot of Oscar bait and a lot of bad films and stuff like that at the time. And this movie came out, and we just thought it was so great that somebody made a movie that is so not pretentious in any way whatsoever, and it's so very aware of what it is, and yet at the same time, I mean, in case anybody didn't know, this isn't much of a spoiler, but there's a lot of action in the movie, but it's all very grounded, and the interplay between the characters is very much about the characters and things. It's not a gigantic movie, it's very small in scope, but it's that what's going on is of dire importance to each character. And so it was so different in that sense, even though it was so grounded and so it's such an easy elevator pitch basically. But both of us really liked it, and I just thought to myself, this would be a movie that I'm sure we're going to have a decent amount of disagreement about, but hopefully you guys didn't hate, and hopefully we, at least got some enjoyment out of while watching, and then would make an interesting episode because we can talk about it and talk about what makes it so different and stuff like that.
Yeah, this was hot garbage. No, I'm joking. No,
I mean, I wouldn't be completely surprised if you might go in that direction, but no, I mean, there's definitely some redeeming qualities to it.
no, I mean, it's a fine movie. It's a movie that's there to exist.
Be fine.
Exist and do a job, and it does the job. And it's a little odd. I think when I originally started watching it, or when I originally went through Amazon, it was labeling it as a bit of like an action comedy or something like that, and I think that it's kind of too violent and too well. It's like the perfect amount of violence that it can't be comedic. Like,
it has comedic elements,
right? But I mean that when it actually elevates to the point of trying to list it as a bit of a comedy, I mean the violence either has to be like Cabin in the Woods third act, like this is just ridiculous kind of violence, or it has to be less violent than this movie. I mean, because I mean the violence of this movie is actually pretty freaking real.
Yeah, a bit too much
at
times.
Right. So I think that's the biggest area where the movie missed the mark, was in terms of, I mean, if it was trying to be, if it was trying to hit a certain chord of levity, in terms of this action sequence and, like make you chuckle from time to time, the violence was actually too realistic. It was actually exactly at the wrong place to be comedic.
I laughed out loud in the theater and at home this time. This was only the second time I've ever seen it.
I guess if it's like spoiler related, you should tell us like which points those are, because that would be interesting. I do think that to piggyback on what Matt said, it's two things. First of all, I thought of Way of the Gun, the Way of the Gun, because of the whole theme of like all these bad people kind of deserve each other, and like nobody can trust anybody. That's a common theme in most like crime movies, and 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 then the violence, like that, like there's some points in Way of the Gun that I mentioned that was like that was just not necessary. Like they just really didn't have to go there. Like when he jumps into the glass and the fountain. So there are similar things here where it was like, I don't think I needed that. Like I think this movie would have been just fine without it. And a good comparison for this movie to maybe we could bring up a few times throughout the discussion is Tarantino, like the obvious one being Reservoir Dogs, where the majority of the movie is in a warehouse, and that's probably the best warehouse movie of all time that I can think of. Yeah, and that is humorous. And the way Tarantino does violence, there is something very humorous. He got even more humorous as he progressed, like after Pulp Fiction, definitely Inglourious Bastards, like Django. He went very over the top. Kill Bill too, like with the violence to the point of humor, like that it's just comedic, which I'm not a big fan of actually. But in spite of that, like I do think that he finds a way to make Reservoir Dogs have a better balance of humor and violence. The violence is not funny, but the dialogue and the characters are funny. So I don't know. It's but I think that's the biggest flaw of this movie is that it's like how we often say about like a decent sci-fi movie or like an action movie, and we say like, well, if only like Denis or like Nolan directed this, it would be like a great movie. But because it wasn't, because they can't direct every movie that's made, it's like subpar. So I feel like this movie suffers from the same thing. Like if Tarantino made this, it would be a great movie, but because it's not, and it's not even close to the quality of dialogue that he has, it barely keeps your attention in spite of all the shooting and explosions and dramatic scenery and lighting. So that's like my overall impression of it. And so I would probably, if I had to rate it, I would probably give it like a 4 or a 5. Like I think more than anything, I appreciated the cast and the acting. But the dialogue, the storyline, a lot of it just was very, very messy. Like I just really, and we can get into some of the details, but it was just some of it didn't almost make any sense. But I get it. It was a premise for the sake of having this movie, and I'm sure it's enjoyable to many people to watch it. And,
I think I liked it more than Gil, but I mean, you got to give the movie a certain amount of props for, well, using props the way that it did. I mean,
Almost all the effects are almost all real in it. It's like very
yeah.
was that like a thing in it?
Hmm?
Was that like a thing that they did? Like a lot of the
there's I don't know. I mean, I was just trying. I was trying to find out how long it took them to shoot the movie, and in the process of doing so, I found a few trivial tidbits and stuff like that. And I mean, it was just saying that like there was a few scenes where the characters are driving in the car at the beginning, where they just used a green screen in the background just because it was cheaper to composite the city in behind them, kind of thing. But aside from that, like pretty much everything in the warehouse is like squibs and the traditional um you know things that they use for for gunplay type scenes and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of makeup and things, and it wasn't there wasn't a lot of special effects in that sense, like computer special effects or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if anything, it's proof that you can use real guns and all that stuff and not pull an Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, there was
uh,
a whole thing in the special features. Actually, there was not a whole thing.
About
There
Alec
was
Baldwin.
no, no. Just in the making of thing that I glanced at. They had a whole thing where they took a moment to show the armor and the special effects guy, and then like kind of like talk about all the preparation they did and stuff like that.
yeah. Um, I mean, that's admirable, and I mean, I think a lot of the choreography was pretty strong. I mean, eventually the movie turns into just one big shootout, with a few breaks in between and everything for some dialogue. But I think they did a pretty good job of establishing the geography of the warehouse and showing where everybody is at any given time, and uh, having the sequence play out the way that it plays out, and characters generally acting the way that their their personalities would
Dictate.
right. So I mean, it's strong there. I also appreciate that Sam Riley had a pretty big role in this. I mean, the only other movie that I really know him from is Control, and he was really good in that movie, and he uh, you know played an entirely, well, maybe not entirely,
Pretty
actually,
damn different.
yeah, and yeah, pretty entirely different character in this movie. Because in Control, he was playing like the one major rock artist who died at the age of 22 who wasn't on drugs. Uh, but, yeah, I don't know. To me, I think this like lands at like a 6.5 or a 7. Uh, it's just one of those movies where, like, I love Cillian Murphy. I love the fact that this was Brie Larson before she went insane. I uh I mean, Noah Taylor is one of those actors who always seems to fall under the radar. Uh and he seems to fall under the radar for the same reason that Gary Oldman fell under the radar for like 30 years, because he's just so good that you barely even remember who he is or what he's doing. Um, I just think that it's one of those movies that it would be an odd situation where a conversation would come up and I would say like, "Hey, we should watch this movie." Yeah, like this is a really good movie that I think that we should delve into, which is really entertaining and is kind of an exemplar of whatever we're talking about. It's just one of those middle of the ground movies that I don't regret spending 90 minutes watching it, but I don't see myself spending another 90 minutes watching it again.
It's interesting you say that because when I saw this movie, I kind of touched on this already, but when I saw it in theaters, I loved it. And then when it came out on Blu-ray, I waited till the price dropped to something reasonable, probably like $10 or something like that. And I scooped it up as quickly as I could. and oddly enough, it sat on my shelf full of movies until a few days ago when I watched it for this. There have been at least a couple of times where I've suggested it to some people who had never seen it before, in the hopes of watching it and getting to vicariously feed off of their first viewing experience, which is something I do often with movies. But in the, let's just call it, let's say I got it sometime in 2017 or something like that. So in 5 years that it's sat on my on my shelf, I've never once watched it, even though I had a very high opinion of it. And I do think it's a movie that has some rewatch value because there's so much going on. So it's one of those movies where once you know what's coming, you can focus more on the details. A lot like, say, Black Hawk Down or something like that. But or Can't Hardly Wait. It's very interesting because, like I said, or like you were just kind of mentioning, it didn't call out to me to watch it. It's in a weird way. It's I think it's a strange movie for me because I really, really like it, but it's oddly forgettable in that sense, despite that feeling. I'd put it at about an 8. It's a very obvious comparison, like Gil said, to Reservoir Dogs. If I was to elevator pitch this to somebody, essentially it's Reservoir Dogs where there's a big giant shootout in the warehouse rather than a bunch of people going through a bunch of mystery of what the heck just happened in and so forth. So it's a lot more violent in that sense, and action packed and such. But it's I don't believe that, and we can go into this in more detail, of course, but I don't believe that this movie was ever trying to be Reservoir Dogs. It's definitely not as good as Reservoir Dogs. And it's funny. I don't know. All I would say about it up front is simply that I think that the director did a really good job directing the movie. I think to kind of piggyback on what Gil kind of touched on earlier, it's like, I don't think that this movie would have been better directed by Tarantino. I just think that and I think the writing's just fine. It's not like, doesn't blow me away or anything like that. It's very serviceable for what the movie's trying to do. I just think that this is a movie that is accomplished what it was trying to do very well, but what it was trying to do, it was not super ambitious. You don't walk out of this movie with a feeling of some incredible catharsis that you do with with movies like Christopher Nolan's films and Tarantino's movies and stuff like that. But I don't think it was ever trying to reach that level anyway.
Yeah. It's interesting. The critics were fairly kind with it. It got 6.3 Metascore, and and actually it's got 6.3 from the audience, IMDb rating. So it's I would actually expect it to be lower. So I guess there is something to it. Like I said,
it didn't make any money, according to IMDb,
which is surprising. Yeah, because it's like a shoot 'em up movie with it's a very strong cast. I think if I'm not mistaken, Armie Hammer was probably coming off of Social Network, and
he was just blowing up this year because this was the same year as Man from U.N.C.L.E. I don't know if this was before or after, but yeah, he already had that Social Network fame, and
and Charlotte Copley also, I think, around that time
big.
was doing a few movies with what's his name, Neil Blomkamp or whatever, the guy from District 9.
He was the Charlotte. How do you say his name?
Charlotte Copley.
Charlotte Copley was, in my head, was that District 9 guy who was in this and was that one with Matt Damon.
It's the same director.
Is it the same director?
Yeah, what's it called? Like something.
For sure.
Elysium.
Elysium, that's the one. Yeah. Um, Great premise for a movie ruined by the last 30 seconds of the film. But yeah, anyway. Yeah, did we want to just move right into
Yeah,
the spoiler stuff?
Yeah.
I also just really quickly. I mean, obviously Brie Larson was just coming off of Room. When this
Was it
came
like
out,
after
Yes.
Room?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
right after Room.
Yeah, I was
At-
gonna
at
say
this
like Brie
point-
Larson. Pretty much for me, the only thing she's done that I felt had any value was Room.
Yeah,
What?
and it's got nothing to do with
Dude,
like
Scott
politics or
Pilgrim?
anything. Oh, that's true. She was decent in it,
Don
but she wasn't.
John?
What was she in Don John?
She's the
She
younger
was
sister.
younger sister. She's always like a sister. Like
She has the really
Yeah.
awesome. She brings the whole like point of the movie home at the end.
But let's just say that she's very replaceable in those roles. I don't think she left her mark. In Room, she was the movie, basically her and the kids. So obviously that was
Strangely,
like
I defend her from time to time, except for the bullshit that she's said off camera. But oddly, that's her biggest role and her most successful movie, and I've just still never seen it.
she's kind of like a less charismatic, not as good of an actor, Amy Adams type of thing. You know,
That's
she's
probably fair.
like she's not the drop dead gorgeous type, but she's attractive, so she can fit in a lot of like different roles. She could have sex appeal, but she could also be like a tomboyish type of thing. But you can't see her doing nearly as decent as a job as Amy Adams did as like Lois Lane or some like of these characters, because she doesn't like. I mean, and I haven't seen the Captain Marvel thing. I don't think I've seen any of those movies, so I don't know if she did better there.
I love Amy Adams, but Amy Adams, by no fault of her own, is a terrible Lois Lane.
She wasn't great, exactly, but it would have been even worse, is what I'm saying, with Brie Larson.
Well, yeah, that would have just been also bad casting. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that what happened with like Amy Adams is they kind of felt like, well, she's a tough cookie, so it's just gonna like work out. I think Zack Snyder, much like George Lucas, is like kind of like thinks like, if just cast the right people, but don't actually give them good stuff to like build a character, it'll still work. It's on the page, but no, it's not, dude. You gotta direct.
I think there's a lot of evidence that Zack Snyder was intentionally trying to be controversial with those movies.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. He's kind of like a fuck you guy type of thing. Like he was just trying to like
the opening scene of Batman v Superman is him taking Jimmy Olsen, the character that like everybody is reading comics as kids associated themselves with and like saw that through the eyes of and idolized Superman and everything, and they put a gun to his head and shot him in the face in the opening scene, and just like, this is not your old Superman, come on.
Yeah.
It was like a middle finger to the fans. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
Right.
the only thing with those movies that really could not be denied, and maybe Zack Snyder made a mistake by casting him, is how good of a Superman, what's his face was. Henry Cavill was like, because he was a perfect Superman, and if he had
in spite of the terrible script and horrible
and I know we've had this discussion, and I like Man of Steel more than you, but I definitely think he deserved a better Superman movie, and he could have easily like made one with the right script.
He's so good in everything that he's in. I don't know if I've seen a role with him that was like bad.
Yeah. But anywho, so you're gonna say something, Matt?
Just imagine having $300 million to just give a middle finger to your audience.
I mean, I think he just makes his own movies and he hopes that people like it, and yeah, he tries too hard to not be like
he's like a mini me to Kathleen Kennedy. I mean, like, I mean,
I think it's
I
two
mean,
different things, but
yeah,
kind of.
right. But Kathleen Kennedy has like what $10 billion to give a middle finger to her fans. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I
all she does is flip us off all the time. So yeah, so I mean, yes, Zack Snyder is a better person than she is. I don't know if she, and he's probably more talented. But you know, Kathleen Kennedy is definitely the better capitalist. But anyway, yeah, that was a rant that I was not expecting to go on, but you
I feel the same way. I was like, how did I get talking about Superman? This is horrible.
know,
Not what I wanted to be doing right now. It happens. It's all good. Gosh, I'm just looking at his thing right now. Did Charlton District 9 basically made him an actor.
yeah,
He was uncredited in a short film and uncredited in another short film, and then he did that.
yeah.
That's crazy. And then after that, another short film. Like, and then from there, immediately after District 9, the next year he does the A-Team where he plays Murdoch. And then a few other things, Elysium. Oh, then a terrible video game that we don't need to talk about. Then I think the American version of Old Boy. Pretty sure 2013. That's probably the American version. And then he's in that stupid Maleficent movie.
The short films were with the same guy, like with
Oh yeah. I
Blomkamp.
assumed
it
as
was
much.
the short that District 9 was based on Alive in Joburg.
Oh,
And
right.
Yellow is also him.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they were like friends in the neighborhood.
Oh, probably, or
Because
school or something.
Neil Blomkamp, if I'm not mistaken, was a special effects guy, and then he kind of used his talents to make these fancy short films that had special effects in them. And then he kind of sold himself off and say, like, listen, I know special effects, so I can make like a science fiction movie for really, really cheap. And that's how he got to make District 9.
Which was really good.
Yeah, like it's crazy how well. I think it's like a $5 million movie or something. It's like
no
ridiculous.
way. That's
Like,
got to
it's
be
like,
on the top 20 list of like most successful movies. Then.
yeah, I'm trying. No, actually, let me see. Offered him 30 million to do whatever he did. Blah blah blah. No, I'm trying to find the budget, but yeah, I remember. But no, sorry, 30 million. It's still pretty low. It's a huge like heavy special effect movie.
Yeah, well, it's a heavy special effect movie made in 2009. I mean, like a sci-fi movie at that time would have like an $80 million budget, or maybe even
100. Yeah.
Yeah, well, 80 million if it's like not a high priority for the studio.
Yeah. No, but
of course that's back when those kind of movies were still being made.
Yeah, but unfortunately, he was one of those directors that kind of burned too hot and like didn't really make a second good movie at any point with all his attempts.
I didn't even know he made Elysium. I mean, I think that like I don't want to harp on it, but I mean, I think that's a great movie up until the last minute.
It's okay. It's got issues, and also he made Chappie, which was not great. No, I didn't see Chappie, but but I heard it was pretty good, pretty bad.
He's got a movie out now, Gran Turismo.
Yeah, but that's like
I have
a
heard
car
that's
movie.
pretty good. It's not just a car movie; it's a video game car movie.
Yeah. Actually, that movie was supposed to take over for Oppenheimer back on the back in mid-August. So I don't know what it did with other auditoriums, but obviously ours is still going until next
I had
week.
a coworker tell me it was a really good movie. I'm going to check it out this week.
He seems to like to make shorts. He's been making shorts all along. That's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Digimon Hanzo is in it. I haven't seen him in a while.
He also, I think, is going to be in the Zack Snyder Rebel Moon thing.
Okay.
interesting trailer for that one.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. So back to going to spoilers? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, Gil, did you ever give your like actual
Yeah, it was like
rating?
4 or 5. I would say like a 5.
Oh yeah, you did. Okay, yeah, I'm just making sure. Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah,
Spoilers.
Jason, I am curious. Which parts did you find funnier than others, or at least laughed out loud during?
I mean, I'm kind of surprised that I even have to say them, and they're so funny. No,
No, I'm just curious. I barely remember any
I'm
detail
trying to
of this
think of a
movie, and
few
I just
things.
saw it.
No. Well, for one thing, the obvious one is the Charlton Copley. I mean, he's just hilarious. His character is so vain, and he's so ridiculous. You know, I mean, and he's so believably ridiculous. He thinks he's so much smarter than he is. He thinks he's so much more respected than he is. Everyone, especially Brie Larson, are like rolling their eyes every time they're next to him and he says anything, and they're not looking, and he's not looking at them. You know, I mean, he's so funny throughout the movie, and he's causing so much of the trouble. That's, you know, he's not the main cause, certainly, but he's so funny. I mean, 2/3 of the way through the movie, he's been shot at least once, maybe twice, and it's probably worth mentioning that every single character in this movie gets shot, like, or killed. You know, I mean, there isn't anybody who comes out unscathed. And but this guy, he's been shot at least once. Everybody at this point is crawling, and either out of necessity or out of trying to avoid getting shot. And he takes about probably 2 to 3 minutes to get a bunch of tape and tape a bunch of cardboard to his arms and legs and knees and make it, and so because he's planning to crawl out of the place. And at one point when the what's that awesome guy's Jack Rayner, when he makes fun of him for it, he has some stupid line about how when he had special forces training at one point that they taught that because he in his own twisted mind, he thinks that he stands more of a chance of dying from infection by getting his arms cut or something like that as he's crawling through this crappy warehouse than he does of getting shot, you know, or something like that. It's the kind of thing that a complete idiot who thinks so highly of themselves would say. It's so funny. And, you know, I mean, aside from him, I mean, like, I was listening to the first 5 minutes or so of the audio commentary, hoping that they would talk about how long it took them to film the thing. And it's kind of funny, Gil, you mentioned how you felt that the violence was a little too violent or something like that, whatever you were saying. The director was saying that the first draft of the script was actually much darker, and then he gave it to his wife to punch it up, and she added all the comedy into it. And it's like some of the best lines in the movie are hilarious. You got like we as the audience get to see that the Steve-O guy he's driving in the van with the other guy, and his face is all beat up. You know, he's the night before, or he had gotten really beat up by somebody, and he's not a super smart guy, and the other guy isn't either, his friend. And Armie Hammer meets them for the first time, and he's talking with the bosses. You know, he's talking with Cillian Murphy and his buddy Frank. And you know, you can tell that the three of them are pretty serious people, and they're here for a gun deal. You know, and he looks back at the other two, and in the previous scene where Armie Hammer wasn't there, we as the audience get to see that he's requesting some makeup so that he can cover up his eye so that he's not distracting and doesn't become an issue, kind of thing. That's a stupid thing for that character to do, but at least it's understandable because we are watching that scene play out. And you know, they dab a bunch of this crap on his face, and then Army Hammer just gets to watch as this guy with a bunch of makeup on his face and is picking at it, and the other guy's poking the bruise on his face. And that's his introduction to those two characters. And he looks over at Cillian Murphy and he just says, okay. And he says, let's get this thing started. And he glances over at them and he says, the fag and the moron were a really interesting choice for your backup muscle, but okay. I mean, hey, when you've seen the scene that precedes it, it actually kind of makes a certain amount of sense. But from his point of view, that's a hilarious take on what he just saw. But anyway, I also think personally, I mean, even though I like Steve-O's character, I think he's the biggest idiot of the entire group. He's the one that causes all the death and gunplay and destruction and chaos. I mean, we later learned that some chaos would have erupted anyway, but the whole deal falls apart because he's a moron and he feels entitled to sex from a woman who he beat the night before and then got beat as a result of, and this whole, drama played out. And all he had to do was be apologetic, and it probably would have all gone away, but he's a freaking moron. So for, 60 minutes of the movie, the last 60 minutes, that's all big giant gunfight, he, despite all of his idiocy, is staying alive. All these people are getting shot over and over and over, and he is staying alive like a cockroach the whole time. And personally, I feel horrible for Jack Rayner's character because his cousin is the one who that guy abused, and they're trying to kill each other this whole movie and they can't do it. At the end of the movie, when that van, again, we're in the spoiler section, rolls over his head, I mean, it's like one of the most satisfying moments ever. It's not only is it, satisfying in a grotesque sort of way, it's hilarious that that's how he met his end. Like, this guy would not die, and it was just so satisfyingly awesome. I can't help but laugh at that scene.
Yeah, I don't know. For me personally, that's one of the things that troubled me the most is the way the deal falls apart. It just doesn't work for me at all. But I just went along with it after that. It's like, so over this, like, that's the reason why the deal's not gonna go right. Like, it's not because the gun were the wrong ones, or like other things, or like pride, or something that's would actually make a lot more sense than like, oh, yesterday, just this guy just happened to like mess with my sister. Like, it's such a convoluted coincidence that of all the women that he could have been involved with the night before, it was like his sister. But I don't know. I guess maybe they go around the same circles, the same clubs. So maybe that's somewhat believable.
They don't portray that particular aspect as a common thing. I mean, like, everybody else is surprised, including those two characters. I mean, that's the only thing in the movie that's a shock, is the fact that this gun deal is about to go down, and two of the lowest minions on either side of the deal happen to have gotten in a fight the night before.
Yeah, no, the whole thing is very strange. What was the thing towards the end? I remember who I think Cillian Murphy said to Brie Larson something about like the whole thing was kind of like a setup or something, like they hired the shooters or something. What was the like? There was some sort of like not resolution, but like revelation that I kind of didn't totally get.
So you've got two basic sides. You've got the Irish people. You've got Cillian Murphy and his whole crew, and you've got the people selling the guns, which is of course the guy Frank and the black guy Martin. Right now, or I'm sorry, not Frank. Frank is Vernon. Thank you, Vernon. Charlton Copley's character. So you've got those. Each side has two guys basically that are the head honchos for their side. Then you've got the two people who set up the deal. You've got Brie Larson and Armie Hammer, who are more or less siding with their groups, more or less. But they're kind of, they make a very good point at the beginning of the movie to state that they're more or less in it for themselves. They're just kind of trying to survive. But you've basically got two sides to the conflict the entire time. But about halfway through, two random guys with rifles start shooting at them and ambush everybody. At the end of the movie, the part you're talking about is basically Brie Larson telling him that Brie Larson and the guy Martin, the guy who got shot in the head, the two of them set up the double cross and the ambush in order to take all the money and get away with it.
The two of
Brie Larson and the black
Brie
guy.
Larson and Cillian Murphy were the one who plotted to basically have the whole thing fall apart. And
No. Brie Larson and Martin, the black guy.
Oh, the black guy? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. And when did they discuss it at any point? Because I thought the whole revelation thing was with Cillian Murphy towards the end.
Well, Cillian Murphy discovers it, but
I see. But he still, I guess, but what she did wasn't against him, his interest.
Yeah, sure it was. I mean, she probably was going to more or less either have him killed or take everything away from him, one way or the other. But I mean, the two of them have a real flirtatious like thing throughout the whole movie. And more or less, I would say that of all the people involved, Cillian Murphy seems to be the most genuine out of all of them. I mean, he's also obviously someone with criminal ties who's planning to take a bunch of assault rifles to Ireland or something like that.
That was also weird. The fact that like the whole when I read the IMDb, it was like, this was in Boston. Based on all the accents, I thought it was like in the UK or something.
Well, it's a bunch
how
of
is he
Irish
gonna get
guys.
the guns to Ireland? Like, I guess on a boat or something.
Yeah. I mean, he's just planning to ship them over there. But, obviously it's easier to get guns in America than it is in the UK.
Yeah, maybe. I guess so.
I would think definitely.
Well, I mean, especially in the late 70s with the conflict between the Irish and the British and so on and so forth.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you couldn't get it in the UK.
Right. Yeah. Cillian Murphy and his crew are all, I presume, IRA. And
I think I don't know for sure. I think Frank and Cillian Murphy definitely, and I think that that Frank has connections his sister obviously lives in America, in Boston, with Steve-O.
Yeah.
and Steve-O's friend is just his friend.
Yeah. But I mean, like, to this day, the IRA is considered to be a terrorist organization. So So you go back to the late 70s. It's you can understand how it could be hard for them to get guns.
Yeah, I mean, so the idea is that they're having the deal there to buy a bunch of guns, and he's going to take them back to Ireland, and then the Americans that are Martin's American, obviously Charlotte Copley's South African, but still they're living there in America. They they're selling the guns, but the idea is that Martin is as frustrated as you'd imagine anybody would be to be partners with such a ridiculous guy that what's that guy's name again? What's his character's name? Vernon. Sorry, Vern.
Yeah.
Vernon.
Yeah, he's such a difficult person to deal with, that he's planning to double cross him with Brie Larson, and so that's where all that stuff comes into play.
I did find it interesting that in the trivia it said apparently the role of Vernon was supposed to be Luke Evans, and he ended up dropping out because he was scheduling conflicts with Beauty and the Beast, and that's when Copley got cast. And then also apparently Olivia Wilde was supposed to be Brie Larson's role.
I can see her doing a good job in this too.
Yeah, it would have been like probably like break even. It wouldn't have made it better or worse. Like,
I like Olivia Wilde as an actress. She's pretty good.
yeah, I liked her in House. I mean, she was fine.
Yeah.
I don't think she's amazing. She's just like, yeah. But
Drop dead gorgeous. Yeah.
exactly, like she's very impressive.
She's exotic.
And she exactly like
Yeah.
something like that. So maybe like I don't know, maybe that would have brought something. But
Oh, also an awful human being, but
yeah.
Terrible politics, maybe.
Well, I guess we're also works.
No. She's an awful human being. But,
Well, we can
Also-
exchange stories later.
okay. All right.
It kind of works out too that Army Hammer has the whole controversy and like falling out,
Yeah.
like out of grace, like watching this movie. It's like, yeah, though I think, but more than anything, Cillian Murphy is like just coming off of like watching Oppenheimer is like, oh, this is nice. I had to get to see him act again after he acted his heart out in that movie. So,
Yeah. No, I mean, Cillian Murphy, I think has been one of the most underrated actors in the world for about 20 years now. I mean, even in movies that you might not like Sunshine. I mean, he's still he's still a hell of an actor in that
yeah,
movie.
Awesome.
no, I like him. He's probably one of the better things in that movie. Yeah,
Right. I mean, 28 Days Later. I mean,
yeah,
he's
Batman Begins, Dark Knight.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
he's great. I'm glad he got his Oppenheimer moment. I wonder if like he might get an Oscar for it.
no,
You know,
I am rooting for him, and I'm rooting for Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
I think that yeah, and I mean, I feel like Cillian Murphy with Oppenheimer might be having like a Gary Oldman moment with Darkest Hour, in that film people have known that these guys have been around for a long time and how good they are, but the general public, well, they're not Brad Pitt or Robert Downey Jr. or anything like that. They kind of fly under the radar, and suddenly they do get that title role in this movie, and they get to really showcase what they can do, and suddenly they're vaulted to public attention. I could really see Cillian Murphy in that kind of Gary Oldman level right now in terms of public attention.
yeah, I mean, it's not that I think he would necessarily get more roles or anything. I think he's pretty much doing what he wants to do. Like he has the career that he wants to have. But it is kind of cool that like after doing all these small parts and Nolan films, like he basically called him up one day and said like, okay, so this next one, you're it. Like
Yeah.
you take center stage. There's no like and funny enough, like I don't know why, it was just like a funny story, but like he Matt Damon like he said that Christopher Nolan called him back for Interstellar, and he said like yeah, Matt, how there's no small roles, only small actors. Like yeah, this is a small role. But I guess he got him back because he gave him a slightly bigger role in Oppenheimer. So it's worthwhile to do small jobs for Christopher Nolan. He doesn't forget you.
I mean,
It does
apparently
seem that way.
well, I mean, there's a story going around that he actually apologized to Florence Pugh for Oppenheimer. Like he was just saying to her how this is a really small part, and you're kind of blowing up right now, and and apparently Florence Pugh said, I don't care if I am just a background actress, like serving coffee to somebody, I'm game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was a lot more than that.
Yeah, she was pretty important, but anyway,
Yeah,
we're
no.
digressing.
But yeah, but I think that kind of leads back into this movies. I do feel like that when actors do take these ensemble movies and like when there's no ego, when they're like just let me like do like, whatever's interesting, even if it's a small part. Actually, I just saw like the second season of Good Omens, and they have John Hamm as Gabriel,
Oh, that's
the
interesting.
archangel, but he's got like memory loss the entire season, so he doesn't know
What?
who he is. So he's like behaving really oddly the whole show, like a non-human, but doesn't know he's an angel. But it's kind of like a small part in the small show, and in the same way that, of course, David Tennant and what's his face, Michael Sheen,
Yes.
Yeah.
that's his name. Yeah, I mean they're two of the biggest actors in in the UK basically, and the fact that they're doing the show mostly because it's a Neil Gaiman thing, and it's a great great parts for them. But yeah, so I like that when, and similar thing with John Hamm with Maverick, like Top Gun Maverick, is like the people say like, I don't care if I have a small role. I mean, it's a sequel to Top Gun with Tom Cruise. I'm fucking there. Like I'm gonna do it.
Yeah,
And
I saw an interview with him talking about how he was like really excited to do the movie.
yeah, it's like I like that. I think there's more and more of that. If there's one thing I will say about the state of cinema, is that there's more and more of that where like eh, the whole thing of like small roles in movies really enriches the movie because otherwise if it's just like all egos and it's like I'm only gonna do leading roles, then I think you lose out on a lot of like really good parts that would have benefited from having someone
Mm.
with some charisma or like some you know good baggage from the rest of their work. So I'm glad that's
Not to
happening.
not to retread on our last episode, but Tom Cruise in Tropic Thunder.
Yeah, like Tropic Thunder was a big one, for sure. Like that was all like about smaller parts to some degree, or people doing things that they don't usually do. Funny enough, like Robert Downey Jr.'s kind of similar thing. What he did there is he did in Oppenheimer, like two things that he doesn't often do lately is like comedies or serious movies. So
Yeah.
yeah. No, I think it's the strength of this movie. Also, the guy Harry, like Jack Raynor.
Yeah.
Speaking of Florence Pugh or whatever the last name, he was. I was like, his face looks familiar, but he had the long hair, and I couldn't
It was
recognize
in
him. Then
Sing Street.
he was in Sing Street. That's one thing. Who was he there? Because
He was the
that's
older
one.
brother.
Yeah, but even more so, I remember it from Midsommar,
Oh, yeah, I didn't see that one.
the horror movie, with Florence Pugh and Ari Aster. Yeah, like that's he played her boyfriend basically. It's like essentially like a co-lead in that movie. Um, it's a good movie, but yeah, but that's my main takeaway is that like yes, like if you do good on casting, which they did here, even with so dialogue and so direction, it held up. Like it didn't get too boring. It didn't get too like monotonous. Like the whole one location thing. It was no 12 Angry Men, of course. But as far as like
Right.
that's the main thing I would say is like, and if you have one location kind of movie, and obviously another example with Tarantino is Hateful Eight,
Yeah.
which apparently was one of the inspirations for this movie too, because it came the year before. But or at least in the style as they were making it. But it's you definitely see the difference in quality. Like when someone like a Tarantino or Sidney Lumet does like a chamber drama, it goes places. Like it's a journey. Like it's got ups and downs, like highs and lows, dramatic ones. Not just like now we have guns blowing, now we don't. Now we have guns blowing again, and now we don't. That's not high and low. Like the high and low in a Tarantino movie or a Sidney Lumet, and there's some other examples I'm sure we can come up with are it's drama, it's story, it's just there's less of that here. But I get it. This is like a fun shoot 'em up movie, and it's got like a shtick, and it's enjoyable. Like if you want to see something like that, oh, I wonder how they pulled it off, and if it worked well. But I agree. The main takeaway for me, aside from the cast, is the fact that I'm not sure how rewatchable this movie is. I guess for the cast, yeah, maybe.
Well, just throwing it out there because I mean I agree with you. It's not Reservoir Dogs, and while it's a slightly more difficult thing to compare it to because 12 Angry Men is literally talking heads. It's definitely no 12 Angry Men either. Um, but I mean, like an interesting movie that I think is a very good comparison to it is there's this movie Unknown. It was like what year did this come out? Let's see, 2006. So like a decade earlier. I mean, I rented this movie from Blockbuster because of its cast. You know, I mean, it's like Jim Caviezel, Greg Kinnear, Joey Pants, Bridget Monahan, Barry Pepper. I mean, it's just got all these big names that I really liked. Peter Stormare's in it. Um, I watched this movie like one time, and it's about a bunch of guys waking up in a warehouse, and then they slowly like getting into altercations and stuff like that because nobody can remember what the heck happened or how they all got there. But I mean, it's easily like one of the most forgettable movies. In fact, I probably only remembered it because of the similarities to this movie, being that the entire thing takes place in one location and it has a big ensemble cast and so on and so forth. But like, all I'm saying is that in a spectrum of movies that take place in one location, I mean, I would hardly put this on the opposite end of Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, I can see that. It's got worse reviews.
Mhm.
Unknown, although the audience rating is the same as Free Fire, which is maybe that makes some sort of point. It's like I said, so like maybe there's like certain qualities to this movie. Like I said, it doesn't get too boring. It does have like its way about the violence, and the cast is very solid. That maybe like that's why critics said like, there's some value here. But for audiences, like maybe there wasn't as much value in Unknown, but for audiences, if you're just coming in and you just want to see a shoot 'em up movie, it does the job. Like it basically, what else can you ask for? You can, I think we brought this up on Running Scared. Like not every movie could be, like we said, directed by Nolan, Denis, or Tarantino. You gotta have like some movies that are gonna be less than, because let's face it, there's only there's always like some number of superstars at any one era of
Well,
of movie making.
that's an interesting comparison but I was just going to say like to answer your question, where you were like, what else could you ask for? I mean, the reason I give it an 8, even though I love this movie, is that while I love it, like I said, I don't see it as super ambitious. The ending of Reservoir Dogs has this, I think, very meaningful, climax. It has a very meaningful ending to it. There's other movies. I don't think that The Hateful Eight is as good of a movie as Reservoir Dogs, but the ending of The Hateful Eight has something really meaningful to say. How
Hateful
well
Eight
it
or
can
Reservoir Dogs?
both. I'm saying.
Oh,
I'm
both.
saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm saying that
Because you started
Hateful
with
Eight.
one and finished with the
Yeah,
other side.
well, what I'm saying is that the Hateful Eight isn't as good as Reservoir Dogs,
Reservoir, okay. But
but
they both had like
they
meaningful
both have a
endings.
pretty meaningful ending. This one, I'm not saying it's void of meaning. It just doesn't have that punch. I mean, heck, you while we're talking about, let's just go over all of them. The 12 Angry Men has a catharsis to it. You get to the end of that movie and you're like, whoa, it's like, I don't know. This might be a bit of an exaggeration, but I wouldn't argue with somebody if they said that movie was like life changing or something. It's a great movie. This movie is, Free Fire is very, very good. I don't think that the script had anything in it that you get to the end and you're just like, standing ovation kind of thing. It's just, and so to me, it's like, what else could you want? I mean, maybe a little bit more meat. That's about all I would want. I think it's a wonderfully put together movie that intended to set up characters, give you realistic characters, and give you a reason why they're going to have a real time 60-minute shootout, or whatever the actual length of the shootout portion is. It's about 60 minutes probably, but you get this story that just unfolds in real time, and they're all just shooting at each other and trying to figure out what the heck is going on and trying to survive. And for that being its goal, it accomplished it pretty well. It just doesn't have some awesome punch at the end that makes you go, I gotta tell everybody I know about this movie.
It lacks a certain je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's necessarily substance that's missing. It's just like the better ones of these types of movies. Definitely, whether it's like a big twist in the end, or whether it's some sort of revelation, or yeah, like I said, catharsis. Like it doesn't necessarily have to say anything, but there's definitely like I feel like Reservoir Dogs for sure wasn't necessarily a substance heavy movie. For that matter, like Pulp Fiction as well. And this might be a subject of conversation at some point, because I know we've had this discussion about, like I just watched this documentary about Kubrick. Like it's a Kubrick by Kubrick, with it's like an hour of like basically snippets of interviews that he did with this French journalist. And he says, they get very deep into some of his movies, and he says he mentioned about his first movie, how it was like overly amateurish, but strive to be too poetic and stuff, but it was a good exercise for him because it was the right idea, just not done correctly, and he kind of took that with him to the rest of his movies, only more humbly, more don't play up the meaning or what you're trying to convey, but still have it be there, just in a lesser amount, because it's worthwhile, for a movie to be very entertaining, very fun, and if you want to dig deep, there'll be something there for you to dig deep and kind of get meaning out of, but at the same time, I think that there's movies like Tarantino. I think Tarantino and maybe Sergio Leone, and that kind of makes sense because he's kind of like his stepchild. But they're like the two possibly greatest directors that mostly made movies that had no substance. Like they were not trying to say anything. They're not trying to explore the human condition. They're just out to make great entertainment and have a cathartic story with a great resolution and a few twists and turns, and it's exciting. And the only time that Sergio Leone tried to have any substance was in Docu-Sucker, and it's by far not his best movie. So you just see it that just doesn't work for him. What works for him is to just be this exciting, really fun, really cathartic filmmaker that's just out to take you on a ride, like a good roller coaster ride, not like the Marvel ones that Scorsese compared to roller coasters.
Oh my god!
But point is that that I think it's an interesting tension. The movies that just are just out to be great entertainment and have some catharsis as a story, because every story ending properly is satisfying. And then there's movies that just dig very deep, like 12 Angry Men and like other ones. So I think there's I think we've mentioned before, there's a room for both, and if they're done properly. And this is definitely in the category of the just fun and entertainment. But yeah, maybe it was just lacking something like a slightly bigger punch. I don't know what was supposed to be the punch there, really, but I guess it was the whole revelation that she set him up or something.
No, I don't know. For me, when I try to dig into this movie, I think there's something very fascinating about the way that Cillian Murphy and Armie Hammer play off of each other, because they're on opposite ends of this conflict. But Armie Hammer doesn't take anything personally because he's a professional. Him and Brie Larson are the most professional people there. You can really see it in the way that they are trying to manage the situation and prevent it from getting out of hand. Because that's kind of their part in this whole thing. In one of the earlier scenes when Brie Larson is talking to Cillian Murphy in the car, he's describing his relationship. It's kind of the early character development stuff. He's saying that his business partnership with Frank is that Frank is there to do the business, or his job is to make the deal, and Cillian Murphy's job is to make sure that Frank doesn't get in his own way, doesn't ruin it himself, kind of thing, because Frank's a bit of a hothead, you know. And then you can clearly see that on the opposite side of it, that Vern is just a train wreck of a person to deal with. But what I'm getting at here is that throughout the movie, throughout the conflict, I mean, you know, you've got the two personalities that have to come to a conflict, which is Frank and Vern. And the two of them go so far out of their way to try and get to that stupid phone that's up in that office. And they kill each other basically in the process of doing so. And it's some of the more violent stuff in the movie, actually, what they do to each other up in that office. By the end of it, every single person is dead. I mean, the last 4 people alive that you know of that are alive is Cillian Murphy, Armie Hammer, and then the 2 guys that started the whole thing, the 2, you know, muscle guys, you know, Jack Rayner and the Steve-O character, you know, and they're the 2 that have the biggest beef with each other because Steve-O put that guy's sister in the hospital, you know, or cousin or sister, whoever the hell it was. You know, like, so their conflict with each other gets extremely violent, as I stated before, with the van and everything. They both end up basically dead, and then it's left is Armie Hammer and Cillian Murphy. And at the end of this thing, the sprinklers come on or something stupid like that, which kind of in a way emotionally seems to sort of wash away some of what's just happened. And Armie Hammer, despite being on the other side of things, is so professional that he can walk over and try to help Cillian Murphy up. He gives him his arm to, you know, helps him to kind of get to his feet a bit. And even though Cillian Murphy's kind of, you know, kind of resisting a bit, he's like, come on, just like stop. Like, let's go get a drink. Let's just put all this behind us, kind of thing. And there's something about how the 2 of them, it seems like it's going to have this kind of nice happy ending because they can be, they're the 2 most level-headed people there probably. And then Brie Larson guns them down and takes the money, you know? And it's just, I don't know. There's something about that. I can't, I don't know if I could, I'd have to really think about it if I was going to try to verbalize it as a, you know, a theme or something like that. Cause I don't know if that's really what it is, but I just find there's something rewarding about what's being said there. Just kind of like about the various personalities, how they react in this situation, and how there was almost something beautiful there, you know, something very, I don't know what the right word would be to describe that, but wholesome, maybe. I don't know. That's probably not the right word.
Well,
but
I think as you're explaining it, I think I might gotten
go for it,
might have
please.
gotten something from
Please.
that, because I think that, because I was wondering about like that, like why just one girl, and then you kind of realize, because she's the one who gets away, and also they let her get away.
She
What?
doesn't get away. I mean, she's Steve
Wait.
Buscemi at the end of Reservoir Dogs. She's the one running away with the money when the cops show up.
Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, the movie ends with her getting caught. Yes, it's the whole thing of like, yeah, for sure. But I'm just saying she gets
She
away from getting.
survives.
She
Oh,
survives.
yeah,
she doesn't get killed.
She gets to that point. Yeah.
And the reason why, like, because you when you think about this movie, it's like it's a bunch of guys with guns and a girl, which, you know, oftentimes would be at a disadvantage, you know, physically and whatnot. Even though with guns, it's kind of an equalizer if you're good with guns. But I think it's a strategy, because if you're a woman, you know that can play into your favor in a crisis situation where men would be more merciful
Well, and
towards you
they certainly are in the throughout
because
the
of your
movie.
gender. So, and that's why the whole thing about her saying that like I'm in it for myself
Yeah.
is that like, you know, why would this person like get into crime? That's the other thing with this movie. I was like, that would have been an interesting movie if you want to talk about like they spend this whole time in the warehouse. Like if they had gotten into like, and this is just a whole other movie, but if they had gotten to kind of like while they're doing this shootout, they talk to each other and they kind of like explore how they got to where they got, like as far
Yeah.
as like getting into the life of crime, because it
Some
feels like
Tarantino-esque flashbacks.
maybe something like that. Not necessarily flashbacks, but it could be like one or two lines that they speak to
Yeah.
each other about explaining like how they jumped from one thing to the next, and somehow like got it mixed up in this thing, and now they're stuck in this like life and death situation. And is it worth? Was it all worth it? And all that. But in any case, but yeah, in her specific case, it's sort of like it was like an advantage for her, and that's why she got out, except for the cops showing up. But so like that's why she was the only woman. That's why that was her whole plan. Like she kind of knew that because she's a woman, they would think she's the weakest, and they wouldn't suspect her to be the one that's like to blame for all this. And so it's kind of like the perfect plan. Maybe that's what it's going for, you know.
Maybe on some level. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. She's definitely, it's very clear that she's treated differently in a very realistic way throughout the movie. I mean, Cillian Murphy, she's more or less showing up to the deal on his side of the exchange, so it makes sense that she runs off to their side when the shooting starts. But like you can see the way that Vern reacts. He spends the first 5 minutes of the shootout like yelling at Army Hammer, going, "Why is she over there? Why is she talking to him?" Like all these ridiculous things that you should not be discussing or concerned about in a shootout. But
Yeah.
he's trying to decide if she's an enemy or not. And there's all those moments where she yells out to everybody, "I'm running over here. Nobody shoot at me," kind of moment. And then Jack Raynor shoots her in the leg or something. But yeah, I mean, there's that whole part where Cillian Murphy goes way out of his way to try and cover her, to let her get to the door and get away. And he even yells to the other side, "Hey, everyone stop shooting and let what was her name? Started with a J.
Justine.
He's like, let Justine get out of here." And both sides go, "Yeah, okay, nobody shoot. Go ahead, let her go." Kind of thing. I mean, there's definitely some of that playing out, what you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, generally, it's my last takeaway for this movie, I guess, is that I didn't really understand. It's like, why did this have to go as long as it did? Like, once they
Because it was
started
awesome.
shooting, exactly, because it's like we needed to have a movie, so it needed to go on for like 90 minutes. But it's like once the shooting happens and they disperse to your different corners, why not just communicate, by shouting and sort it all out? Because obviously he still
How are
wants
you
the
going to do it?
guns. Just talk. Like, I mean, they're within shouting distance. Why not
They
just
just
like
think about what started it, though. So you have two guys on your crew, and I'm only speaking from this academically, not from experience, but I would assume when you're living a life of crime, it's pretty important to be loyal to the people on your side. It's and everything. But you got two different sides of people facing each other, and one of them wants to kill somebody on the other side for very, very justifiable reasons. And all that both parties want to do is smooth it over in some way, shape, or form. And when they try to do that, the dumbass who caused this problem says what he says about the guy's sister or cousin or whoever the hell it
Cousin.
was.
It,
Cousin.
it was a cousin. Yeah.
Cousin. Thank you for finally straightening that out. Yeah. I mean, like, this guy is a fucking idiot. Okay. I mean, the girl, didn't give him a blowjob, and he took a bottle and hit her over the head with it. You know, he broke a glass bottle over her head because she refused to give him oral sex. And then when the guy beat the crap out of him, the next day they see each other. They almost get into a fight again, or they do get into a fight again. The guy's trying to kill him. This whole thing is getting so tense that they're about to, murder each other. And he apologizes. They're about to smooth it out. And he says something like, "It's a good thing your cousin didn't blow me because I would have," he says something like that, "they would have found teeth in her fecal matter," or something. He says something so horribly disrespectful that it's like, I am totally on Jack Rayner's side when he goes and gets his gun and tries to kill him. So what are you going to do if you're Army Hammer and you're, Vern, not if you're the Irish guys, if you're Cillian Murphy and Frank and you want to take these guns and go, short of taking this guy, Steve-O, and offering him up to get murdered, what are you going to do? Frank seems like the kind of guy who might actually do that, except that Steve-O is his brother-in-law. So his sister would probably never speak to him again.
If it's like a brother-in-law, I can see that connection. That I didn't even remember that.
And Cillian Murphy is too nice of a guy. He's too much of a stand-up guy to just let this guy get murdered. Despite the fact that he deserves it.
Although he seems like the most professional one and the one that wanted to just like be done.
Well, that's why he beat the crap out of them in front of them and said, "Look, he's been disciplined. He's going to apologize." Yeah. He tried his best. So it's like, how do you resolve that situation? Once the first shot is fired, what are you going to do?
Yeah, it's weird. It's tough, but I will say, as you were saying that, I was kind of thinking like, there's a little bit of a time to kill vibe here.
Yeah.
The circumstances, like, if somebody like abuses your family member, you just want to just kill them. It's very understandable, especially if they're already criminals.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they're like hired guns, basically, to some degree, and they're not the head honchos of this deal, like, you would think that the head honchos will just say like, you and you, both of you, just fuck off and sort it out outside or something.
It wouldn't be the worst thing for them to have done, probably.
Yeah. But once I guess the shooting started, but I'm just saying, a lot of these things are just like very thin threads where like you kind of have to like, fine, okay, I guess that's a reason to have a 60-minute shootout over like an argument between the two henchmen. It's just a bit. It's a very thin, plot line. That's all I'm saying. But it's fine. It's passable.
It's funny, as we were talking about this, I just remembered something. You were asking me about the funny moments of this movie, and Sam Riley, the Steve-O character, he has a kind of subtle joke that is so funny, because in that scene where the tensions have gotten so high, and the other guys, Army Hammer, and they're almost physically holding Jack Rayner back, and he's got a tire iron in his hand, and they're holding him back. And Frank grabs Steve-O and pushes him up against the van. You remember? They take him away a little bit, and he presses him against the van with his forearm on his throat, and he's just like saying all these disrespectful things to him, and he's just like, "You're ruining this deal, and I'm going to kill you," and all these stuff like that. And like, this guy Steve-O is so stupid. In this moment, he's saying all the worst things you could possibly say, because he's not being apologetic at all. He's denying everything, whatever. And Cillian Murphy comes up to him and he's like, "What the hell happened?" And he's like, this guy is saying all these things about you." While Frank has him holding him up against the fan in a violent manner, he says to Cillian Murphy, "It's all lies. It's all lies. I swear on my wife's life," which is Frank's sister. It's the worst thing you could possibly say.
I see. I think the most amusing thing that I heard in the whole movie was in the first scene in the truck when he told them like that he's got like a headache or something.
Yeah.
And he said like, "Do you have something for a headache?" And says like, "I have crack."
Yeah. I think he said, "I have smack" or something.
Smack or something. I don't know what it was, but it was like, boy, that would be like taking a sledgehammer to to try and uh, hit a nail or something. Like it's just like
Yeah.
such an overkill to take like heavy drugs just for a headache.
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't know, but yeah, I don't know why the humor like just didn't really land with me. It could have been just the circumstances in which I watched the movie. But one last thing I was gonna say is that like I didn't connect this earlier, but Army Hammer gave me a little bit of John Hamm vibes in this movie
Hmm.
too. I felt like his presence, like the whole deep voice, tall American
Yeah.
man. I don't know. I felt like it's like for one thing, John Hamm would have been amazing in that role,
Oh man, he would have. Yeah.
and probably would be even better than what he did in Baby Driver.
It's funny when you were making your final point about Brie Larson being, I guess, about the story having some relevance to her being the only woman there. It just reminded me that as I was looking for that information and I was watching the little behind the scenes thing, there was a really funny moment where they were, they, the behind the scenes stuff was, interviewing her and talking to her about stuff. And she was just saying how, she said, in general, I'm used to doing movies where there's a lot more men than women or something like that. I'm not sure exactly how she wrote it. She said it, I mean, but she said, this is a movie where it's like a lot of testosterone. It's like a lot of guys here on set. And I'm like the only woman. And I think there's probably a moment where somebody asked her how that affects things or something like that. I don't remember exactly how they set up the moment, but she says, something I learned on this set is that when you get this many men around, any surface, any wall, any window, anything, any box, anything offset, it doesn't matter what it is. If they find a place where they can draw a penis on the wall, they will. And I just laughed so hard. I'm just thinking, I'm trying to picture Cillian Murphy and all these guys, just like Armie Hammer and all these guys, like, there's dust on the penis.
Maybe they were just trolling her the entire time.
Yeah, I don't know, but it was such a funny moment to think about.